Okay, I'm back from Taiwan after a 3-month long hiatus. I have not quit YouTube. I have not quit live streaming. I was just in Taiwan for the last 3 months. If you didn't know that because you didn't watch my last live stream or you didn't keep up with my community posts, which to be frank, the vast majority of you subscribers didn't, which is fine. But for the 12, maybe if I'm being generous, like 15 people who did, I'm back and I will probably continue doing videos and live streams for YouTube in the next 10 days, if I'm not procrastinating too much. I still have some stuff to set up. Some stuff has changed with OBS, and I have to get my like settings in order. Uh, or it's just my streaming device fucking up. Whatever the case may be, I'm just gonna try and do whatever I can. Starting with this video on TikTok, right? So TikTok is getting banned. Um, it hasn't been banned yet, but judging by how things are going in the United States and what the congressional hearing was like, which I've watched like 4 to 5 hours of, it's not like the entire thing. There was like 7 hours. I'm not sure how long it was exactly. Congressional hearing, Congress hearing, TikTok. I think it was like, oh my god, it was like 4.5, 5 hours. I watched like 4 hours of this thing. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched enough of
Yo,
it to
this has
know
been
what's going on. And there are some things that I wasn't surprised by, and there were some things that I was surprised by, and frankly kind of worried about when it comes to Genshin Impact. I'll get back to Genshin Impact a bit later on, but just for some context, TikTok is, well, you probably know more about TikTok than I do because I don't actually use TikTok. I actually had to reinstall TikTok when it was announced that TikTok was being banned, which is interesting because this is not the first time that it's the United States has wanted to ban TikTok. 2, 3 years ago, Trump tried to do the same thing, but it got shot down by the United States court because it was like some kind of uh, it was not allowed by the amendment or constitution or whatever the fuck they want to call it. I'm not a legal person. I'm just somebody who reads um, Twitter and then go off of what they say. But this time I put a bit more effort into it. So we'll see what this whole thing is about in a couple of minutes. So, anyways, TikTok is an app that was originally created by a Chinese company called ByteDance. ByteDance is headquartered in Beijing, and ByteDance has two main products. One is Douyin, and the other is TikTok. Douyin was the original product, and it's only based in China. That's why the logo for TikTok is actually a D, not a T. I've heard some people say that it's a really fucked up, distorted T, but that's not the case. The logo is actually a D, and also it doubles like some kind of musical note. So that was the original app in China, and everywhere else just uses TikTok because there are different censorship and moderation differences between China and everywhere else, and that has caused some controversy. There's like some conspiracies that China is using TikTok to make kids everywhere else dumber, especially America. That was one of the things that like was implied in the congressional hearing. I remember if they directly said it was about that, but they did say that the CCP could fuck with the algorithm or make it biased in such a way that it favored China's propaganda purposes. So that was the one things that I was not really surprised by, but I was a bit surprised by how much like traction that kind of got. In addition to the fact that TikTok is like a bad thing for children, especially, or bad when it comes to like self harm or harming others. There are videos on TikTok that stay up, and they call for like the deaths of Congress members, or they're just like promoting bad practices. Like I've read some news that wasn't there this one time when somebody posted a bunch of videos about how you could hijack cars, and then the vehicles had to be recalled because the software was so fucking bad. They could literally be hijacked by inputting a fucking USB stick into the vehicle. I wouldn't know anything about this because I can't drive. I don't have a license and I don't have a vehicle. My mom's car is a Toyota Echo from like the early 2000s, and I don't know. There's nowhere to put a fucking USB stick into it, so I don't have to worry about that. That's just not a thing to me. I'm just like too old for that, and I don't use TikTok. Again, I had to reinstall TikTok after the ban was announced just to like get a sense of what TikTok was all about. I tried it out for about 30 to 40 minutes and then decided I still don't like TikTok. And this isn't an age thing. A lot of people say that TikTok is only popular with young people, but when I was in Taiwan, every time I got into a taxi driver, taxi, the taxi driver would be watching TikTok with their phones like hanging up from their like windshield or whatever, and they would just be watching TikTok while they were driving. It was kind of frightening, but at the same time, it does prove that these 40-year-olds, these 450-year-olds are still like they're more tuned into the internet space of things, or more tuned into TikTok than even I am. It's not just it's just not just a children's thing anymore. It has immense reach. It has like 150 million users in America alone, I believe, and who knows how many more users elsewhere. So that's why they had a hearing, because the United States government is kind of skeptical about it. It's not controlled by the United States. The app is not an American product. It's created by a Chinese company called ByteDance, and they're afraid that ByteDance or the CCP could use the info gained from TikTok for their own nefarious purposes, essentially, or they could use TikTok to influence what others think about China or promote the pro-Chinese policies by like fucking with the algorithm. And they're also afraid that TikTok can harm children or whatever else that they deem to be harmful. Those are like the three main points that they went over during the congressional hearing. Now, here's the part where I am becoming a bit more worried or skeptical about this whole thing, about this whole TikTok ban, even though I don't personally use TikTok. So if it does get banned, I'm not immediately materially like hurt by it. If YouTube Shorts, if TikTok, if Instagram Reels, they all disappeared off the face of the fucking earth, I am maybe like slightly positively beneficial. I would probably like slightly benefit from that a tiny bit, because I don't have to see YouTube Shorts anymore. But that's not what's happening. The whole template of TikTok is already here. Even if TikTok does disappear, it's still going to be there in YouTube Shorts. It's still going to be there in Instagram Reels, and whatever other product is created from, the template that is TikTok. And even before TikTok, there was Vine. Even though I don't really remember Vine being ever that big. Like, I did hear some people talk about Vines, but it was never to the same extent as TikTok. But whatever the case, even if TikTok gets banned, the template of TikTok itself is going to stick around. So I don't really buy the argument that if you just ban TikTok, then everything will be happy like rosy, and there will be like daisies everywhere, and everybody will be happy just because TikTok is gone. There might be some moderation differences, but the idea that people can just access a bunch of 30-second videos and waste away their lives and like have super short attention spans, that's not going where. That's staying. So I don't really buy that part of the argument. And as for the moderation side of things, that can change through laws and like different kinds of pressure they put on TikTok. So I don't really buy that either. The only thing that really stands out to me, that the only thing that I find to be like a worthwhile and legitimate argument, is that China or the CCP could potentially use the info gained from TikTok for their own purposes that erode, U.S. national security. And that was a significant part of the congressional hearing, but surprisingly to me, it was not like the biggest part. Like, I would say, watching the whole thing, it was like maybe 10 to 20% of the congressional hearing, and everything else was just like a fucking weirdo, hysterical witch hunt where like Congress members were like asking all of these fucking, like, I don't want to say dumbass questions, but they're kind of brain dead questions. And that reminded me a lot of the early 2000s to like maybe 2005, 2008 era, when like parents and adults were going like fucking nuts over video games. They still do sometimes. You still hear news about how, if you play Call of Duty, if you play Grand Theft Auto, then you're going to turn into this like malcontent who drives cars over people and then shoot guns more, even though you don't really need Grand Theft Auto to tell you that. If you live in America, there are like clubs for this. There are just like individual interests. You can probably buy a gun before you can even learn how to drive. That's just how things are in America. So I don't know why you would blame video games for shootings and shit like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's kind of the vibe I got out of the TikTok hearing. And that was what set off my alarm radar at that point. And the more I looked into it, the more worried I'm getting that this is going to affect stuff outside of TikTok itself. Again, I don't use TikTok. It doesn't personally harm me if it's banned, but that's not the biggest worry I have about the TikTok ban, because why did the TikTok ban fail 2 years ago, 3 years ago now? It was because it was against the amendment rights, or whatever they want to call it in America. It was against the law, essentially, to ban TikTok. You can't take away people's ability to express themselves through like some app. If you do that, you know, you're basically China at that point, right? You're literally your government is telling your citizens that you cannot use an app from another country because it's against the law. You can't access Facebook, you can't access Twitter, you can't access all of these other things in China. So how are they going to get around that legal barrier this time? Well, they're going to do it through this thing called the Restrict Act, and it basically does exactly what it says it does. It's going to restrict what you're going to be able to do on the internet. So let's look at some of the things that it actually says about itself. This is how it describes the act. It's like S686. It's like code name or whatever. To authorize the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries and for other purposes. Okay, so they need to go on to define transactions very broadly in the next like few sections. I will link this Restrict Act in the bottom in the information part of the video, so you can go look at it yourself if you don't believe what I'm saying. But I'm just going to go over the screenshots I took, and then I'll probably maybe like search some things up here as well. But basically, the way it describes itself is extremely broad, because it says here that the Secretary of Commerce, who, from what I've gathered, is not an elected person. It's actually someone appointed by the government. It's not someone that you can influence in terms of who that gets to be. It's not like a member of parliament or whatever. You don't vote for them, and they can review and prohibit. Keyword being prohibit certain transactions, which they go on to define as pretty much anything that can happen over the internet between persons. So persons, that's individuals, not just companies, but persons like you, like an actual person behind the screen that who is watching this video right now in the United States, and foreign adversaries. So they then go on to define foreign adversaries as like China, as Russia, but also a bunch of other like super tiny countries that are frankly irrelevant. And it's very obvious that this is a very biased and like arbitrary thing. There are countries being listed here like, okay, so People's Republic of China, that makes sense. People's Republic of China is a very large and powerful country, probably the second most powerful country in the world right now. And obviously, like relations between the PRC and the United States is not so great right now. But there are also these other countries, like who the fuck cares about Cuba? Like what services, what technology services are they like putting out that everybody is using? What services are people using from Iran or like the DPRK or even Russia? Maybe like VK, I guess, because VK is the Russian version of Facebook. So I guess they could ban VK. I don't know. And then there's also the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela under the regime of Nicolas Maduro's Moros, who I believe was actually elected after like the alt-right super Christian the former, I don't know what her name was, but that's what I heard on Twitter at least. So it seems like all of these, the vast majority of these targets are kind of arbitrary. They are definitely, from the United States perspective, adversaries, or at least the United States government's perspective, but that doesn't really mean all that much, because I don't think the vast majority of Americans think of Cuba as an enemy, or even Iran, because didn't the United States actually pull out of the nuclear agreement with Iran, and that was like this whole big thing when Trump was in power. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of these cases seem to be very unilateral hate fests from America. To be frank, I don't know what the fuck is going on with the DPRK. The Korean War hasn't officially ended, but it's not like anything is happening there except for like somebody throws a missile here and somebody throws another missile there. All in the ocean, of course. And the Russian Federation, okay, maybe the Russian Federation counts because they invaded Ukraine, but it's not like anybody is using apps from Russia all the time these days. So really, it's basically just China. But then they go on to like define foreign adversary as anybody that they can add later on. So it's not just restricted to these countries as well. There's like this part over here. So foreign adversary. foreign adversary, an entity, blah blah blah, cover entity, that's not the part. And then they can go on to add more foreign adversaries. So yeah, there's an entire part here, designation of foreign adversaries, that says that they can just add more later on. So if you thought that it was just China and these like other frankly kind of irrelevant countries, well, things can change. That's just one part that I'm worried about. But going back to what the bill actually says, it says that it can prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries, right? So basically China. And for other purposes, which from what I can gather, the entire bill does not actually define what these other purposes are. So that's incredibly vague and incredibly expansive and broad in terms of its application potentially. So that's another thing I'm worried about. Like, what do you mean other purposes? If you search other purposes, nothing shows up except in the top at the top here. So they should probably get rid of that. And here they define transactions. This is another like what the fuck moment. The term transaction means any acquisition, importation, transfer, installation, dealing in, or use of any information and communications technology, product, or service, including ongoing activities such as managed services, data transmission, software updates, repairs, or the provision of data hosting services, or a class of such transactions. Like, even just these two terms, managed services and data transmission, like, what the fuck goes on over the internet that is not data transmission? Like, holy shit. This practically means everything. It could be a game. It could be like some sort of storage device. It could be like hardware. It could be software. It could be repairs. It could be data hosting, or like a class of such transactions, which basically means everything that is not described here. Importation, transfer, installation. You can't install whatever app that is designated as coming from like a hostile adversary country. Dealing in, so you can't sell it or buy it, or use of any information. So you can't even have the information. You can't even like print a copy of a game, like copy a copy of a game and then install it on your PC, even if you don't pay for it. You can't do that either. Communications technology, product or service. So this could easily be a game as well. And here, they specifically name gaming applications as one of the covered categories of products that they could review and then prohibit. Software designed or used primarily for connecting with and communicating via the internet that is in use by greater than 1 million persons in the United States at any point during the year period preceding the date on which the covered transaction is referred to the secretary for review, or the secretary initiates review of the covered transaction, including desktop applications, so anything on PC, mobile applications, anything on mobile devices, gaming applications, which is all games, payment applications, which is like, I don't know, probably WeChat or some sort of Visa card, web-based applications. So it's literally just everything. Like, you could just say tech desktop or mobile applications, and that covers like, I don't know, 90% of anything you would ever use in the world when it comes to like technology. And this is insane. It's in use by greater than 1 million persons, which might sound like a really big number if you're mathematically illiterate, which admittedly I am. But do you know how many people play Genshin Impact? Do you know how many daily player count play Genshin Impact every single year? This is not just in a year. Like, this is just a daily. This is just a daily thing. There are like 660,000 players playing Genshin Impact in the past hour, and active players over a 30-day period. 65 million players over the last 30-day period. So Genshin Impact absolutely breaks this restriction, this limit here. 1 million persons for like a free or any kind of that like application or software service is an incredibly small number in the grand scheme of things. It's just incredibly small. So the barrier, the bar for being banned is actually incredibly low. It's just really expansive. And then they say that addressing information and communication technology products and services that pose undue or unacceptable risk. In general, the secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, is authorized and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate, including by negotiating, entering into, or imposing and enforcing any mitigation measure to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person. This is an important part. By any person. It's not just a corporation. I want to emphasize, I can't emphasize this enough. This is not just about like a corporation circumventing the ban. This is you, like you as a person, like a person living in the United States. And this will probably affect people not even in the United States as well. I've seen some people like coping that they can just use a VPN, which I will get more into later on, or that they are not located in America, so they are not affected by this. But do you know what companies are in America? Apple and Microsoft and Google, Alphabet, Meta. These companies are all American companies. And do you know what happened in the past as well? Huawei was banned. Huawei used to be like a phone manufacturer or a phone, I guess, designer. And then they also did some 5G, what was it called? Communication services. And they were banned by America because they were like doing too well. So America forbade the companies in America from letting Huawei use their like app store services. So not only could Huawei not access technology in America, they could literally not even put like the app store on their phones. And that essentially made Huawei phones completely useless in like anywhere else other than China, because China doesn't have the same app stores as America and, you know, the rest of the world. So it's entirely possible they could just ban the app entirely from the app stores, even outside of America, because the app store itself is an American product. So, or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that the Secretary determines poses an undue or unacceptable threat of sabotage or subversion of the design integrity, manufacturing, production, distribution, installation, operation, or maintenance of information and communications technology products and services in the United States. So I think this is pretty. It's really expansive, but I can see that it has like legitimate. This is a legitimate fear for a foreign product or foreign service to have this kind of capability. But there are some other points here that I find really like just too. They're too broad. You can literally argue that any service that is too popular that comes from a country outside of the United States could pose like catastrophic effects on the security or resilience of the critical infrastructure or digital economy of the United States. Like what does it mean by catastrophic effects on the security or resilience of the digital economy? Like, does that mean if a company or a product outside of America does too well and then it makes too much money from the digital economy of the United States, couldn't it be argued that that product is like causing an effect that is draining money from the economy of the United States? Could that not be argued to have catastrophic effects? And there's like point number 2 here. Otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk. So it doesn't even have to necessarily do anything bad. It could just pose a risk or an undue, unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of the United States persons. So it doesn't have to do anything bad. It just has to pose a risk. So on number C, there are some other points here. Interfering or altering the results or reported result of a federal election. I think this is very, very, what's it called? I can't find the word for it right now, but it's like, holy shit, I'm having a fucking brain fart. But I find that this is okay. Like, I would agree with this. This is something, if I was running a government, I would say that this is okay. But number D, coercive or criminal activities by a foreign adversary that are designed to undermine democratic processes or institutions or steer policy and regulatory decisions in favor of the strategic objectives of a foreign adversary. So yeah, this is basically what I was talking about with China potentially being able to influence how people think outside of China. That's basically what this is describing. So yeah, a few of these points I find very reasonable. Perhaps a bit too broad still. But some of these other points, like otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of United States persons, you could literally argue any single like super popular application would pose that kind of threat. Like, why would a foreign country trust another social media application from another country when that country is not in control of that application. It doesn't make any sense. Like any country could argue that Facebook or Twitter or YouTube could potentially pose a threat to their country because their their services are not controlled by that country. What if like a separatist or like a terrorist was able to get on those applications and communicate without the knowledge of the country that they are trying to harm? It just doesn't make any sense because it's something that every single country could argue about every single super major popular application. And here is another fucked up part, like procedure. Not later than oh no, this isn't the fucked up part. This is basically just saying that within 180 days of the enactment of this act, the secretary can, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, shall review any transaction described in subsection A to determine not later than 180 days after the date on which the secretary initiates such review if such transaction poses an undue or unacceptable risk under subsection A2 and qualifies as a covered transaction, which is pretty much anything. And with respect to a transaction found to pose an undue or unacceptable risk and qualify as a covered transaction, determine whether to ban it, to prohibit it, or to take any other action to mitigate its effects. So this is just saying that once they determine that that is something that is included here, then they can just ban it. Okay, here is the fucked up part, the civil penalties. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, so I live in America and I like, accessing TikTok, or I like accessing whatever might be banned in the future. I could just use a VPN like they do in China to access that product, right? No. Here is where they describe what they can do to you if you try to circumvent or contravene the ban. Here it says civil penalties. The secretary may impose the following civil penalties on a person. That's you. That's not like a company or like a corporation. That's literally just a person. For each violation by that person of this act, or any regulation, order, direction, mitigation, pressure, prohibition, or other authorization issued under this act, a fine of not more than $250,000, or an amount that is twice the value of the transaction that is the basis of the violation with respect to which the penalty is imposed, whichever is greater. So what this means is that they can fine you for up to $250,000 for doing something like using a VPN to access TikTok, or if Genshin Impact gets banned for playing Genshin Impact on a VPN. So if you're under the delusion that you might be able to circumvent this ban, then well, that's not what it says. They might not do it because it would be really hard. It might be really hard to enforce. They don't even enforce it to this degree in China. If they were able to like literally fine you for $250,000 for every time a person uses a VPN to like access an app that they banned, they would be able to do something that not even China would be able to do. So revocation of any mitigation measure or authorization issued under this act to the person. Yeah. Criminal penalties. They can also, a person who willfully attempts to commit, or willfully conspires to commit, or aids or abets in the commission of an unlawful act described in subsection A shall, upon conviction, be fined not more than $1 million, or if a natural person may be imprisoned for not more than 20 years or both. Holy fucking hell. So if they determine that you are a criminal, trying to like break through the ban, then they can fine you for up to $1 million or imprison you for up to 20 years or both. Oh my God, yeah. So here's something I found on another website, Communications and VPN Tech Targeted. People often legitimately use VPN services to add an extra layer of security for web communications. Furthermore, they allow users to mask or change their internet address. This is often required to access content that may otherwise be blocked or censored. This is all like really basic stuff. The bill, if passed, would attempt to identify information and communications technology products and services holdings that pose undue or unacceptable risks. This could include VPNs if they are used to access banned websites such as TikTok. So using a VPN is definitely like, I don't know how they are going to enforce this, but there's no reason why that they would not be able to fine you, considering that they specifically specify they specifically say that if you do contravene this ban, then they are able to legally fine you for doing it. So that sounds kind of fucked up to me. And here is something I found on China. here is where it's like really, really fucked up to me because I'm trying to find what they do in China to understand what they might do in America should this bill be passed. So here's what they say about VPNs in China. Are VPNs legal in China? Yes, using a VPN is legal in China, even though China has severe restrictions on VPN usage and blocks many VPN providers. Consumers can legally use VPNs that still work in China. Officially, the Chinese government has banned the use of VPNs not approved by the government. VPNs must provide the government backdoor access to be approved, which renders them unsecure. However, this law applies to companies and corporations rather than individuals. So even when they have banned VPNs, this does not apply to individuals. They are really only going after companies and like corporation organizations. Chinese citizens found creating or selling unapproved VPNs have received fines and prison sentences anywhere from 3 days to more than 5 years, but these are implied inconsistently because it's just really hard to like understand who exactly is doing what. Like I said, if they are able to actually find who is using the VPNs to access TikTok, should it be banned, and then fine them for up to 250,000 or imprison them for like 20 years, that would be even worse than what China has been able to do. Here is something else I found out. This was like 2 years ago, I believe 4 years ago. It was in 2019, I believe. China starts issuing $145 fines for using a VPN, with over 30% of internet users in China regularly using a VPN. I wonder why. The government is turning its focus from blocking the VPN providers to issuing fines to individuals caught using one. China's clampdown on the internet continues, but can they ever completely control access? Yeah, so even in a completely authoritarian and like top-down managerial country like China, they still cannot find everyone who uses a VPN and find them and prevent them from using VPNs because it's just too hard. They would literally have to find like 30% of China's internet users. That's insane. So depending on how this works, you know, you could potentially still use VPNs and just like risk your luck on whether or not the American government will eventually will be anal enough to just find you and fuck with you for something so trivial. So here is where it gets the part about Genshin Impact. I made a video about Genshin Impact and how it might be banned in the future 7 months ago. That was probably in like August or July because of tensions between the United States and China, specifically around Taiwan. And this pertains to my life and like specifically because I partially own property in Taiwan, not China, but I also have family in Taiwan. So this is something that affects me personally. But I would still not I just don't find the ban of TikTok to be something that would help Taiwan or to like preserve peace in general. This is just not something I think of. I think if you're going to ban a product, a service like TikTok, specifically because of safety or to prevent like spying, then I think it's already too late. Because there are definitely ways that China could get the same information elsewhere. They could just buy it from like Facebook or Meta or whatever company that they have allowed to sell like personal data from in America. It just seems kind of over the top because when I'm in Taiwan, I don't see people arguing about how TikTok should be banned or how Genshin Impact should be banned, which again is specified here that gaming applications are also on the line are also part of the categories of transactions that can potentially be prohibited should they be viewed as a threat to America, which you might think is completely ridiculous because how exactly could Genshin Impact be a threat or pose some kind of propaganda risk? Well, if you read some of the stuff that official mainstream news outlets or even on Reddit have said about Genshin Impact, here for example is one here in the subreddit fuck the CCP. Here someone says Genshin Impact propaganda, and these are the images they have taken. Let's see what it says. This is just Ningguang talking to Paimon. Ningguang says fireworks were originally developed alongside many other inventions here in Liyue. Wow, everything has so much history in Liyue. As I am sure you already know, everything on this land accumulates history and value as time passes. This is the nature of Liyue. you probably have no idea just what the fuck this person is saying in terms of Genshin Impact propaganda just by looking at the images. But I know as someone who is pretty familiar with this type of stuff that they're probably referencing that the fireworks they're emphasizing the fact that fireworks were invented in Liyue, which is fantasy China in Genshin Impact. So that's propaganda. And here they're emphasizing how much history Liyue has, which is also propaganda for China. And here it's just more emphasis on how the nature of Liyue is that it has a long history, which is something that they also view and construe as propaganda. So taken in a vacuum, this stuff is actually really, really mild. I don't think anybody with like the right mind or is not looking for this type of stuff would think of this as propaganda. It definitely is more like pro China leaning than the usual type of content that comes out of the West or America. But it's not something that will literally jump out at you and say, oh my God, this is pro CCP. This is, I can't let my children see this. They're going to turn into communists. That's not what this is. But still, somebody out there, somebody anal enough is going to find something in Genshin Impact and turn it into something that it's just not. Yes, Liyue does have a lot of good characters. Liyue does have less stuff criticizing the very nature of it compared to other regions. But I would also argue that that's generally how games are when it comes to games made in the very countries that they're from. Like if you go look at isekai novels from Japan or animes from Japan, why is everything literally set in Japan? Why is Jujutsu Kaisen literally set in Japan? And no other country or place in the world has the ability to use curse power to any appreciable degree. Why is it that, One Punch Man, the strongest person in the world is a Japanese person from Japan? It just, it's pretty obvious that the product is from Japan, so they care about Japan the most. It's not some kind of sin. But somehow somebody is still going to be able to turn it into, pro whatever country propaganda. So let's just, I don't know, maybe we'll see what this guy has to say. So, first of all, don't judge me for playing a Chinese made game. Okay, so they already have a problem with a Chinese made game. I thought it was Japanese when I first started playing because it was anime. I didn't know till I got addicted. Yeah, MiHoYo definitely did their job. Their name sounds Japanese. The game's name sounds Japanese. Genshin's name sounds Japanese. It this kind of makes me sad that like if it did have a Chinese game, this game definitely wouldn't be nearly as popular as it is now. It's just something they have to do to market themselves. And honestly, the game company itself is also very Japanese influenced. Like obviously they love Japanese stuff. That's why they call their brand used to be Otaku Save the World. I don't put money into the game. So there are different nations in the game. Liyue is based off China, Mondstadt is Germany, Inazuma is Japan. There are more to come. So in the Japan nation, they made a character based around fireworks and made a big deal about the fireworks there. A bunch of shows were mad and said China created fireworks. They should have done it in Liyue instead of Inazuma. So it is Chinese New Year and the game has a special event. They specifically bring up fireworks, how Liyue created them, how the nation has history and they care about their ancestors. Like, damn, that is not some subtle propaganda in direct relation to what the shows complain about. Up till now, the game creators seem to do their best to do what they wanted, but still had to listen to the CCP, of course. They had to censor some characters' outfits on the Asia server because CCP decided they were too lewd. There is also a theory that the rest of the nation's gods were made only to be women, so they didn't have to deal with the no feminine men thing, since previously some of the male characters were not macho men, and one male god is often mistaken as a girl, although I think they had their own clapback. After the no feminine men thing, they came out with this ripped dude, but he is a goofball, caring, and child at heart. It is also interesting that their god admits that he did some shady shit in the last what? In the last Archon War, during the Great War between the gods. He also decided to stop ruling over his nation. He faked his death and let the people rule themselves. In the game, the gods' power depends on how much control they have over their nation. The god of the German-based country has freedom policy and doesn't intervene, and he is weak because of that. Yeah, and some of the responses got it right. They have it entirely right. Like this guy, Baby Card of Sure Dog, says that's mild compared to the web novels. Easygoing sounding titles read like Japanese ultra nationalist novels after the bland or cliched intro chapters. Wasn't that exactly the plot of Gate. I don't know what the Japanese name is, but I distinctly remember Gate like it had a Japanese name like Jetai or something. But the anime Gate is essentially about how like these portals open up in Japan, and the Japanese military goes into those portals into like this backwards medieval land, and they kind of just save it. There's all sorts of stories from all over the world. America has these stories. It's natural to focus on your own country and the culture that you know best yourself. Like, sure, maybe there were some shows or people who were mad that, you know, Inazuma got a character based on fireworks, but China didn't, so they complain about it. But it's also completely natural to just say that, fantasy China invented fireworks because China in real life invented fireworks. It's not like a weird connection to make. And it's also not weird to say that Liu has a lot of history because, China also has a lot of history. It's just not, it's just so mild. And I, do you get what I mean? If you go deep enough into any kind of phobia, like xenophobia, if you like dislike someplace enough, you can make any number of arguments to turn whatever they do into propaganda, into like some sort of propaganda. Anything that is not negative about that place or that culture or a certain person could be construed as propaganda. And even here in like mainstream outlets, you can see like the New York Times said something about this, I believe, about how Genshin Impact was copying Japanese anime industry and doing it better than Japan. They had to like they had to portray it into like in this such a negative way. And I just wonder if it was any other country, would it have been like this? Because to me, Genshin Impact is an ode to like traditional RPGs, JRPGs combined with Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's not something that is not just a copy, but something that is actually positive in how it portrays JRPGs. To me, like Genshin Impact is how I kind of wished Final Fantasy had evolved rather than turning into what it is now. I can't really go deep into that without making like a bajillion people mad. So they do say a lot of like general stuff about how Genshin Impact is really big for the gaming industry in China. But here they also mentioned the portrayal isn't necessarily positive. The country is cloistered, xenophobic archipelago clouded in radioactive fog. For Japanese players, those negative aspects have been far outweighed by the positive portrayals of Japan and its video game culture. So yeah, they're just talking about how Inazuma is really aggressive and hostile. Yeah. Blah blah blah. And here they mention Chinese companies trying to sell games abroad have encountered suspicion of the country's tech industry and authoritarian tendencies. Genshin has faced questions over its Chinese origin, with the game initially receiving a frosty reception in Japan over rumors that it included Chinese spyware. Was this ever the case? Like, yeah, I remember that thing about the Chinese spyware, about how Genshin could access like kernel level authority in your computer. I don't know. I'm not like a tech person or like a math person or anything that requires technical knowledge. I'm not efficient. I'm not proficient in any of that stuff. But there was this whole controversy over how Genshin could access kernel level authority in your desktop or computer, and that was a thing for a while. And I literally don't remember how that was resolved or if it was resolved in any way whatsoever. So I must assume that it was resolved or people just stopped caring once they got too addicted into Genshin Impact. It's either or, I don't know. But do you see what I mean by, if people can get this like hysterical over TikTok, and I'm not saying that their concerns are wrong or that the concerns about spying or about privacy or censorship or any of this stuff is wrong, but if you get hysterical enough about TikTok, especially when you look at the congressional hearing and the kind of questions they were asking the TikTok CEO, then it's not too far of a stretch to say that if you just switch some words around, like instead of, kids hurting themselves or learning bad things from TikTok, what if you just switch that with gambling? You could also say that Genshin Impact is hurting children or people who are easily addicted to things by saying that it's teaching them gambling, it's making them addicted to spending money on things that have no value because they're literally just data inside of a computer, and you don't even get to own it forever. If TikTok or Genshin Impact one day shut down, where is that money going? You literally lose all your money, and even if you don't lose all your money, what is it exactly? It's just a 3D model. So they could argue that it's even worse than gambling because at least gambling in real life, you might get some money out of it. But with gambling in a video game, what exactly do you get? And then combine that with, oh my God, Genshin Impact is made in China. And now you have a Genshin Impact ban as well as a TikTok ban. And there's nothing in the bill itself that contradicts that. In fact, it specifically says that gaming applications, again, are part of the categories that they are looking into to review and potentially ban. So that's my general concern about Genshin Impact. There seems to be a lot less focus on the security side of things or the privacy side of things that I was expecting going into the congressional hearing. It was a lot more just straight up xenophobia. It was like the TikTok CEO is from Singapore, and I don't know if he definitely does not have Chinese citizenship. He is probably ethnically Chinese, but there was like this one guy who just kept calling him Chinese, which I find really ironic because you know there's all this emphasis that Taiwan is not Chinese, and Singapore is not Chinese, and Hong Kong is not Chinese, and by Chinese they mean PRC Chinese. But this one time when they actually like come into contact with a Singaporean who does not have Chinese citizenship, and they were like, "Nope, you're Chinese. You answer to the CCP. You work for a Chinese company. You're the enemy." And it just seems so heavy-handed. And again, I did make a video about how Genshin Impact might be censored, and there was a point here at one point that I also mentioned that Genshin Impact has, or not Genshin Impact, but Chinese games have already been censored in some places, like India. Like there was, I think it was 2 years ago, India started banning Chinese games, and not even necessarily Chinese-made games, but just Chinese-owned games. It didn't have to be made in China. Like Garena Free Fire was banned in India, and that was made in Singapore. If I remember this correctly, it was either made in Singapore or Vietnam, but the parent company is Chinese. So why the hell is this not working? Garena Free Fire. Garena Free Fire is a battle royale made by 111 Dot Studio. So where is 111 Dot Studio located? Location. So the game is published by, oh my god, that doesn't say. Which country does Garena Free Fire come from? The game is published by 111 Dot Studio globally and Omen Studio in the Netherlands. But where is 111 Dots located? It's located in Singapore. Singapore. So it's not made in China. It's literally a game made outside of China, but its parent company is 111 Dot Studio. And 111 Dot Studio is owned by, I think, where is it? Garena. And where is Garena located? Also Singapore. But it's owned by, oh my god, I'm going down some pretty deep holes here. So China. Where does China come into things? Is Tencent involved? Before the IPO, Tencent was the major shareholder of Sea Limited, and I'm guessing Sea Limited is its parent company. Yeah. It was owned by, it's still owned by Sea Limited, and Sea Limited is owned by Tencent, I believe. No, in January 2022, Chinese gaming giant Tencent offloaded its US $3 billion investment in Sea. So they're no longer involved in Sea Entertainment, I believe, but still, it got banned. It's just like so tangentially related to China. It's made by a company located in Singapore, owned by a company also located in Singapore, but had investment from Tencent. So the bar for banning apps, for banning these games, for some countries is very, very low. All it takes is investment from China, which might make you question whether or not League of Legends will be playable in the future, because it's also owned by Tencent, at least right now, right? Tencent owns Riot Games, and Riot Games is what makes League of Legends. But what I suspect will happen in this situation is that if there ever comes a time when China has to divest its interest from from what games are being made, what games are being sold in the West, what will happen is that what will most likely happen is that Tencent will divest its interest from like Western companies. They will just have to sell their shares in Riot Games. Riot Games will probably not be moving to China. They will still be in the United States just without Tencent backing. So Riot Games will still be a thing. League of Legends will still be a thing. I don't think League of Legends is made in China. I've heard some things about how skins are being made in Hong Kong or China or Shanghai or something, but the vast majority of the game is located in the vast majority of the development of the game, I believe, is still located in America. So that's what this was what was happening 2 years ago in May 2021 exclusive. China's Tencent is in talks with US to keep gaming investments. Tencent Holdings is negotiating agreements with the US National Security Panel that would allow it to keep its ownership stake in US video game developer Riot Games and Epic Games, according to people familiar with the matter. So even 2 years ago, this was a matter that was being discussed and might be brought up again should this bill pass. I'm not saying that Tencent being able to hold shares or ownership of American IPs is a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that as a gamer, I do feel like this bill is overreaching and overstepping what I would consider to be reasonable safeguards against TikTok and against like spying by the CCP. If I am going to have to like use a VPN to play Genshin Impact, or if I am going to lose everything I have invested in Genshin Impact, this is a very, very selfish thing to say. But if I am going to lose out on entertainment or things that are materially beneficial to me just because of a decision made in America, fuck that. So yeah, India, the 54 apps banned list was made public by the government. The IT ministry said the 54 apps were blocked and banned in addition to the list of Chinese apps banned in India 2020 for transmitting real-time data to servers located in a hostile country, which was using these apps to collect personal data of Indians from mining, collating, analyzing, and profile. The ministry also reported that the data collected by the apps was meant to hurt the sovereignty and integrity of India and to indulge in activities detrimental to India's national security. Know more about it, blah, blah, blah. 367 apps in 2020, plus another 54 in 2022, which adds up to 321. The apps getting banned in India includes apps such as TikTok, PUBG, UC browser, and more such well-known apps. So TikTok has already been banned in India, so has PUBG Mobile, not the PUBG desktop application or game. I just call everything application these days. It's really annoying because I never used to, but I guess this is just mobile speak now. PUBG Mobile is a game that I believe was made in China. Let's see, PUBG Mobile. Developers, Tencent Games. So yeah, Tencent is directly involved. It's definitely at least somewhat related to development in China. So that makes sense. I believe they also tried to rebrand themselves like PUBG Mobile Battlegrounds India. Was it called Battlegrounds India? PUBG Mobile India. Battlegrounds Mobile India. It got rebranded as Battlegrounds Mobile in India, and then it got sold off to a company called Krafton in Korea, I believe. Yeah, Krafton somewhere over here, and it was sold off to Krafton in India, in Korea, and then republished in India, specifically for India, and then it got banned again. Yeah, Battlegrounds Mobile India unbanned news latest. Upthrust Esports owner Kartik Sabharwal comments on the BGMI return and upcoming. So maybe it'll return at some point in the future, but it was banned again after its initial ban, and then it rebranded, and then it came back to India, and then it got rebranded again, and maybe now it's going to come back again. So who the fuck knows what's going on? I'm just saying this stuff has already happened outside of America. America has usually been pretty safe from these overreaching bans that could affect gamers. And I'm not saying that this could be just restricted gamers. I'm just saying I am primarily a gamer. I don't use TikTok. I don't use these other apps or Shine, these other Chinese apps. So just speaking from a gamer's perspective, I am very worried that in the future, games related to China or made in China are going to just not be a thing anymore, especially outside of it. Like We've got Honkai Star Rail coming up. We've got other games like Zenless Zone Zero and other non-MiHoYo games like Black Myth Wukong. Black Myth Wukong I could see being less controversial because it's not a live service game. But I don't know. Even as someone from Taiwan who risked like actually being killed in a war with China, it just doesn't seem right. I don't know. Anyways, that's all I have to say for Genshin Impact and how it's related to. Oh yeah, there's also this thing. There was a Reddit post on the official Genshin Impact um, subreddit 2 days ago where somebody else had the same concerns as me. They probably read the Restrict Act. They probably heard about TikTok and realized that yeah, this is a Chinese app. This is Genshin Impact is also a Chinese app, and they put two and two together and realized, holy shit, this could actually be very bad. And they made a Reddit post about it that got 1,229 upvotes. Um, there was also like, yeah, I archived it. I was lucky enough to archive it. This was in 4 hours with 347 comments. So this was huge. People were getting their like, the people were scared off their fucking seats. And there's a lot of copium here. Like that's why Cognosphere or Hoyoverse is based in Singapore. Even though when Shanghai went into lockdown, Genshin Impact also got delayed by 3 weeks. So there's no reason to believe why it being based in Singapore would have anything to do with anything when it comes to being banned. India still banned Garena Free Fire, even though it was made in Singapore by a Singaporean company, published by a Singaporean company. So just the fact that it's based in Singapore, it's just such copium. The TikTok CEO is also Singaporean, and the congressman really didn't give a shit. Yeah, just seeing the TikTok hearing, I don't think knew. Yeah, this guy is literally saying, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're ethnically Chinese, if you're working for a Chinese company, if you're in a Chinesey space, that's really all it takes. The bar for banning things is very, very low. And that's what I'm afraid of. It doesn't really have to necessarily pose even a security threat. Just the fact that it's Chinesey is under this atmosphere of hysteria is probably enough to at least put some attention on Genshin Impact. In fact, I think the reason why they banned it, whoever the mods are, labeled as controversial topic, potentially misleading, and then just straight up banned it and removed it. And I don't want to get into too much of a conspiratorial line of thought, but Genshin Impact, the official Genshin Impact company, does have an official Reddit account as well that regularly posts on Genshin Impact these days. So I'm assuming that whoever runs the official subreddit is also in contact with them. And maybe they just thought, well, seeing as how the TikTok ban is probably going to happen, we might as well not draw as much attention to ourselves as humanly possible. Just head off whatever might be happening and keep our company and game going for as long as possible. Very smart thing to do. And I don't think I'm helping here. Anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out. I will see you guys later, hopefully for the live stream or whenever I start streaming again. Live stream for Genshin Impact's patch, of course. See you guys later. This is Bench Gamer. Bye bye.